Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right from the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM, Houston, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today. Well, it is 1:47 a.m. And what shows up in my blog post, or what shows up in my feed? New York Times article, Manchin pulls plug on climate and tax talks, shrinking domestic plan. Once again, a Democrat named Manchin decided to put a stake in the heart of Joe Biden's economic program for the average American citizen. Oh, the bill that gave money to the plutocracy, that gave money to those big builders, that gave money to the guys who are going to build infrastructure on your backs. Wasn't the problem giving them the money, but investing in human beings, investing in ensuring that the climate doesn't fry us all. But they don't care. They don't care. They'll be dead by the time we get up another 0.5 degrees. By the time all these hurricanes are coming with full force, they'll be long dead and gone. That is the height of selfishness. That is the height of evil. Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is no different than any one of the soulless Republican leaders out there. He has condemned the world. Condemned the world. We could have done so much. And using I find it ironic, right? One of the excuses, here's the headline, first of all. I mean, it is just completely ridiculously amazing. Manchin pulls plug on climate and tax talks, shrinking domestic plan. The West Virginia Democrats' decision dealt a crushing blow to President Biden's domestic agenda, effectively ruling out action on anything beyond prescription drugs, healthcare subsidies. Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, pulled the plug on Thursday on negotiations to salvage key pieces of President Biden's agenda, informing his party's leaders that he would not support funding for climate or energy programs or raising taxes on wealthy Americans and corporations. They're making a killing. The inflation rate that we have today, that increase in prices, are going directly to line the pockets of these rich people. And Manchin said, not even that. Not even taking back some of that to take care of our climate. Not even taking care of some of that to take care of the things to put our kids through school, to ensure that we can invest in human beings. A decision by Manchin, a conservative-leaning Democrat whose opposition has effectively stalled Mr. Biden's economic package in the evenly divided Senate, dealt a devastating blow to his party's efforts to enact a broad social safety net, climate, and tax package. Well, I can't say I'm surprised, right? I knew he strings you along and he strings you along so that you don't have enough time to build up against him. That's why he's stringing them along, and they never learn. The president never learns. The president thinks he can negotiate with the Republican leadership. The president thinks he can negotiate with Manchin and Sinema. You can't. What you can do is use your bully pulpit and start building up others, start building up the other senators that we need to get elected to get things done. You don't have to throw Manchin to the dogs so that he'll run to McConnell and say, "Hey, McConnell, you are now the speaker. You are now the majority leader." We don't have to go that far, but we can start working towards doing things right. We can start working towards letting those people whose votes we need in November understand that, hey, unless you vote, it only gets worse. What we want is to get better, and it's high time now for Biden to see that the moderate way is a disaster, not only for Americans but humanity at large, from the environment to people's health to the transfer of the people's monies to the parasites. The parasites being those capitalists who produce nothing but have all of us produce for them. We produce and they take the cut. We produce and they take most of it. That's where we're at, folks. Schumer said it was a gut punch. Why? It's not a gut punch. Stop playing with the American people. I tell you what, though. Look, where people always want to throw their hands up in the air and say, we just don't matter. I'm saying now is the time to redouble your efforts and put the folks in there that's actually going to get something done. And we still have time. We still have time. There's still a lot of primaries out there. Stop voting for those who believe in some mythical center. Start voting full-fledged progressives wherever you can find them. Wherever you can find them. And get ready, folks, because soon we are going to have to exert our will, the national strike. You remember how during the pandemic, when the economy shut down, how the rich folks got scared and they really started to try to do things right? And now that it's back, the parasites, the psychopaths, they just can't get enough. They just can't stop taking. They can't do basic arithmetic. If they are growing at 7% and we are growing at 2% or less, it's unsustainable and they know it. So they don't mind taking it all. Joe Manchin. I just saw something from my good friend John Garcia, and I want you guys to notice something, right? I believe in free enterprise. I want the pizza shop, the grocery store, all these things to be privately owned, if that's the case, right? You can sell, you can charge prices based on competition, etc. I believe in that. I believe that profit margin for that person who works hard. I believe in all of that. But I also believe that we can't have a certain sector of this economy that can do what the oil companies are doing and some parts of the food companies are doing. They are simply raising prices because they can, and they know that we got some extra cash from the government during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So they can because they know people have the money. So instead of these people being able to save the extra or get something better with the extra, these people are just taking their money away. To my good friend, John Garcia, he's from Venezuela. And I hope you guys realize that we are able to have conversations, complete disagreement. Eventually, I think John is going to agree with me someday. But, we can disagree and keep talking about it until we can actually say, well, I see what you're saying. Well, John Garcia says something that is important, very important, because it shows that he listened to what I said. And I want to address what John Garcia said. That's my buddy. This is what he said, all right? He said, he said energy, food, communications, nationalization. Call those strategic goods and services. That's exactly what Chavez did. The results are evident. Let me tell you what happened, okay? There are two things that happened. And what happened is you have to look at this through non-American eyes. Because what America does, right? Venezuela is a very rich country. They're full of oil and they have a lot of gold and other minerals. So there's a rich country. But the people are very poor. And the reason why are the people in Venezuela who runs everything. And Brother Garcia, he's a good guy. I know him personally. He's a good guy. But there are certain things that I don't think my brother sees because he was of the class that had, right? What very few people see is that America has had its tentacles in Venezuela. And corporations were taking the lead of America. Let me give an example. If we nationalize certain food industries, right? The ones that are critical, as John Garcia perfectly says, and the oil sector and these other sectors, what you start to get from the private sector, as opposed to saying, let's see how we can reconfigure ourselves into a bifurcated economy, something that we need to do in the United States as well. How can we reconfigure ourselves into a bifurcated economy so that those items that people need that don't need to be profit-based, gasoline and all of that, because we all need it, and then we have the rest of the economy that is laissez-faire, right? If I want to sell motorbikes, I sell it. I do what I need to do, and it's profit-based, competition-based. That would be fine. But that's not what happened in Venezuela. We got the full-on sabotage, not only by the United States against Venezuela, but by the corporate elite in Venezuela who created shortages, right? Okay, government, you want to take care of these criticals? Good. We're going to stop being efficient. We're going to stop doing X, Y, and Z. So they created a shortage. It's just like what we do in America, right? What did they do in order to try to justify high prices? They shut down refineries at all the wrong time. It's all what the private sector does to maximize their monies. There are answers. We just don't follow them. I saw some comments that, let's see, the one that stands out, I think, is still Garcia. Because Garcia says that, that the plutocracy is now controlled by those guys who own the companies, meaning the socialists who own the companies, et cetera, et cetera. And I always ask the same question, right? For a economic system that is predicated on ripping people off to succeed, it has to find a negative in any other type of system, whatever you call it, whether you call it socialist, bifurcated. I call mine a bifurcated economy, right? You have to find a reason. But I ask you a simple question. What makes you believe that a company run by government executives has any less of waste or efficiencies than one run by private corporate guys? There's only one difference. There is another layer of taking, right? In other words, shareholders have to get paid, profits have to be made, executives get their bonuses. If you run by the government, you may have bonuses, etc., but you don't have this stuff called stocks, which have to pay to dividends and whatever to these shareholders. So even if you are a tad bit more inefficient than the private sector, you're ahead. But you generally are not, because again, the private sector have this semblance of efficiency. But it's not true. If you take a look at every time we have the private sector take over public transportation, it costs more. Medicare run by private corporations called Medicare Advantage, it costs 20% more. I mean, every time we can do a direct comparison between a service government provides and a service that governments relegates to the private sector to provide, it always turns out that government is less expensive than and more efficient than the private sector. And that goes without saying. If you have to pay a dividend, if you have to pay all these things, that profit then becomes an expense to the system. It's a lie that we have been indoctrinated with that we have to get out of our system. Every country in Europe that has tried privatizing the rails or the buses or whatever, they ended up paying more, getting less. Because remember, corporations are there to maximize the profit of the shareholders, while when run by government, there's one exception to the rule. And let me give you that exception. If I only have part-time services that I need, let me give an example. Let's say in the Northeast where we have to clean the roads of ice, right? We're cleaning the roads of ice. It doesn't make sense for us to populate all ourselves with all these trucks and all of that. When you have individuals that can, for the winter season, private companies go ahead and they clean up the streets. Individual private companies clean up the streets. And then in the summer when we don't need them, they go do something else for somebody else. That is more efficient in the long run for the government to use the private sector to do that. But when it comes to things like healthcare, gasoline and all of that, it will always cost more to have the private sector do it. Recently, Adam Kinzinger, Representative Adam Kinzinger, Republican, gave this particular excoriation of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It is an essential listen.
Justice Department lawyers are not the president's personal lawyers. We count on them to be on the side of the law and to defend the best interest of the United States, not the best interest of any political campaign. That's how it's been since the department was founded soon after the Civil War. Justice Department lawyers are supposed to play it 100% straight. President Trump tried to erase his loss at the ballot box by parachuting an unqualified man into the top job at justice. It was a power play to win at all costs with no regard for the will of the American people. It was about ignoring millions of votes. Ignore them, throw them out, label them fraudulent, corrupt, illegal, whatever. Facts were clearly just an inconvenience. From the Oval Office, President Trump urged others to bring his big lie to life. He begged, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. He didn't care what the department's investigations proved. What good were facts when they would only confirm his loss? And it's no surprise that all the far-out, fully fabricated, whack-job conspiracy theories collapsed under even the slightest scrutiny. That insanity went from the internet to the highest levels of government in no time. The bottom line, the most senior leadership of the Justice Department, from Attorney General Bill Barr to Jeff Rosen, his successor and his deputy Rich Donahue, everyone except Jeff Clark, was telling President Trump the very same thing. The conspiracy theories were false. The allegation of a stolen election was a lie. The data left no room for doubt, nothing to question. And the Constitution left no room for President Trump to change the outcome of the election. But we're here today because the facts were irrelevant to President Trump. It was about protecting his very real power and very fragile ego, even if it required recklessly undermining our entire electoral system by wildly casting baseless doubt upon it. In short, he was willing to sacrifice our republic to prolong his presidency. I can imagine no more dishonorable act by a president. We owe a great debt of gratitude to these men you've heard from here today. Real leaders who stood for justice when it was in grave peril, who put their country first when the leader of the free world demanded otherwise. They threatened to resign rather than corrupt our democracy. And thanks largely to each of them, President Trump's coup failed. Contrast that to Jeff Clark, who would do exactly what the president wanted. Say there was massive fraud, forget the facts, and leave the rest to President Trump's congressional friends. Mr. Clark refused to cooperate with this committee. He pled the Fifth over 125 times. Why risk self-incrimination incrimination. And President Trump's congressional friends, some of them are angling for pardons. They knew that every bit of what they did was a lie and it was wrong. That's all the more reason to respect those who came here to testify today. We thank them for their unflinching service in the face of incredible pressure. As it's said, the only thing necessary for evil to succeed is good men to do nothing. Thankfully, there were good people in the Department of Justice. You heard from other good people too on Tuesday. They too defended us. But I'm still worried that not enough has changed to prevent this from happening again. The oath that we take has to mean something. It has to cut to the core of who we are and be the driving force of our service to this nation. We on this committee, we may be able to shine light on the darkness, but that is not enough. It's now up to every American, now and in the future, to stand for truth, to reject the lies wherever we confront them, in our towns, in our capitals, in our friendships, in our families, and at the ballot box, and within our own minds and hearts.
This is the most important part of the hearing, in my opinion, bar none. I'll play it, and then we'll get there on the other side.
Mr. Van Tatenhoff, in the run-up to January 6th, Stuart Rhodes publicly implored President Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, the 1807 law that allows the president to call up militias to put down a rebellion against the United States. And I want to get your thoughts about this in the context of your prior relationship with Stuart Rhodes. I understand that you had conversations with Rhodes about the Insurrection Act. Why was he so fixated on that? And what did he think it would enable the Oath Keepers to do?
Well, I think it gave him a sense of legitimacy, that it was a path forward to move forward with his goals and agendas. I think we need to quit mincing words and just talk about truths. And what it was going to be was an armed revolution. I mean, people died that day. Law enforcement officers died this day. There was a gallows set up in front of the Capitol. This could have been the spark that started a new civil war, and no one would have won there. That would have been good for no one. He was always looking for ways to legitimize what he was doing, whether by wrapping it in the trappings of it's not a militia, it's a community preparedness team. We're not a militia, we're an educational outreach group. It's a veteran support group. But again, we've got to stop with this dishonesty and the mincing of words and just call things for what they are. You know, he's a militia leader. He had these grand visions of being a paramilitary leader. And the Insurrection Act would have given him a path forward with that. You know, the fact that the president was communicating, whether directly or indirectly, messaging, you know, kind of that gave him the nod. And all I can do is thank the gods that things did not go any worse that day.
What did the Oath Keepers see in President Trump?
They saw a path forward that would have legitimacy. They saw opportunity, I think, in my opinion, to become a paramilitary force, you know?
Last week, the Department of Justice indicated that it has evidence of the Oath Keepers bringing not just firearms, but explosives to Washington ahead of January 6th. And the committee's also learned that Stuart Rhodes stopped to buy weapons on his way to Washington and shipped roughly $7,000 worth of tactical gear to a January 6th rally planner in Virginia before the attack. Did you ever hear Rhodes discuss committing violence against elected political leaders?
Yeah, I mean, that went back from the very beginning of my tenure. One of the first assignments that he brought to me, wanting me to do as more of a graphic artist function, was to create a deck of cards. You may remember back to the conflict in the Middle East, where our own military created a deck of cards, which was a who's who of kind of the key players on the other side that they wanted to take out. And Stewart was very intrigued by that notion and influenced by it, I think. And he wanted me to create a deck of cards that would include different politicians, judges, including up to Hillary Clinton as the Queen of Hearts. This is a project that I refused to do. But from the very start, we saw that. There was always the push for military training, including there were courses in that community that went over explosives training. So yeah, this all falls in line.
Mr. Van Tatenhoff, you say in your very thoughtful written testimony that we received today that you fear what the next election cycle will bring. And you also say that we have been exceedingly lucky in that we have not seen more bloodshed so far. I wonder if you would elaborate on those two statements.
I think as far as it goes, we've had the potential from Bundy Ranch on. I mean, being boots on the ground at these standoffs, and they were standoffs where there were firearms pointed across lines at federal law enforcement agencies. Whatever it may be with that particular standoff. But I think we've gotten exceedingly lucky that more bloodshed did not happen because the potential has been there from the start. And we got very lucky that the loss of life was, and as tragic as it is, that we saw on January 6th, the potential was so much more. Again, all we have to look at is the iconic images of that day with the gallows set up for Mike Pence, for the vice president of the United States. And I do fear for this next election cycle because who knows what that might bring. If a president that's willing to try to instill and encourage to whip up a civil war amongst his followers using lies and deceit and snake oil, and regardless of the human impact, what else is he going to do if he gets elected again? All bets are off at that point. And that's a scary notion. I have 3 daughters. I have a granddaughter. And I fear for the world that they will inherit if we do not start holding these people to account.
Now, that is, I don't want to say that is scary because these guys don't scare me, right? But what he says is true. I mean, think about this. These guys were preparing for war. They had food supplies for a month to hold on to the capital. They were arming people. They had arms outside of Washington, D.C. since they couldn't bring it in at the time. But as soon as they took over, their militia was going to be in. You remember that there's the general out there that's the brother of what's his name? They held back sending in any kind of National Guard or militia on purpose. They wanted that thing to cauterize. They wanted the insurrection to cauterize in such a manner that it really looked like the end. Folks, this was no joke. And what gets me is that too many are playing this as if it were, that it didn't come close to do much of what we knew it could have done.
Please get one of my several books out there. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, for a contribution of $120. It's worth it. How to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors for a contribution of $120. How to make America utopia, take away the economy from those who rigged it, for a pledge of $120. Get any 2 of those books for $200, any 3 of those books for $250. The contributions from my books go directly to support our station, KPFT 90.1 FM. Alternatively, folks, please get your basic KPFT only membership for $40, a Pacifica only membership for $25, or choose from one of our many other gifts for your contribution. Just go to kpft.org. Choose Politics Done Right for the program and select an option either for our books or something else to support the station. It is definitely worth it. You can listen and or watch Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My Twitter handle is @EgbertoWillies, @EgbertoWillies. But don't you forget, listen to us live on air at KPFT 90.1 FM on Thursdays at noon and at Fridays at 11 a.m. all Central Time.
Today I watched and discussed as Senator Cornyn simply in a nonchalant manner said, we're not doing anything else about guns. Pretty much it's over. There's not bipartisan support to do anything else. What he means is that Republicans intend to do nothing else. So saying it's bipartisan that's stopping it, it's not the issue. It's that Republicans decided that they don't mind the killing of Americans with AR-15s and other assault rifles, as long as those kids and those folks who love their guns have you to use as target practice. No problem. We have a big population. We have 330 million people. We don't care if just a few of them get knocked off every day. Actually, it's every day that it's occurring. Every day. We don't care. Guns, guns, guns. It's not a problem. I want you to listen to this. But you know, as I was watching this, I said to myself, I wonder if the news media is going to just listen to Cornyn and take it as a matter of fact and not put any kind of narrative onto it. And you know who surprised me? You know who impressed me? Mika of Morning Joe, because her response was perfectly on. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
No, we're done.
No more action.
No. It seemed to me to be yesterday the president talked about everything that they wanted, but they didn't get in the bill. But the sort of things he was calling for don't have support in the Senate or in the Congress on a bipartisan basis. In other words, they can't get done.
Senator Cornyn's comments there follow President Biden's renewed call for a ban on semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 after the July 4th mass shooting in Highland Park, Illinois. Senator Cornyn also said he had not received any contact from Democratic senators to begin a new round of talks on gun legislation. Mika.
Senator Cornyn, we're done. I mean, who are these Republicans? Who are you people? You don't want to ban on assault weapons. You wonder why the police are afraid to go into a school with an active shooter who has weapons of war. There's a reason they hesitated. It may not have been right, but my God, police are now outgunned. So you don't want to ban on assault weapons. You don't want more restrictions on these weapons of war. You want women who are raped, young girls who are raped, to be forced to have births. I mean, this is what the Republican Party is at this point. And forget the fact that you will not stand up about what happened on January 6th. This is impossible. This is a party that is taking on cases that don't stand up to where we are as a country. It's so hard to hear. And hear these mass shootings, Senator Cornyn. They're coming to a state or a city near you. You know it. It's just like Trump. You know how it ends, and yet you still continue.
Mika is absolutely right. It is interesting because early this morning, when I saw the videos on CNN from the Austin American-Statesman, I went ahead and I wrote a tweet, and I want you to check out what I wrote. I wrote on that tweet that said, and I placed the video on it as well that from that program. NRA said it takes a good guy with a gun to take out the bad guy with a gun. Tens of police, the good guys with guns, ran from one bad guy with an AR-15. Perfect reason to ban AR-15 and assault guns, assault rifles, weapons of war. Won't you say? I mean, who are these people, as Mika says? Who are the Republicans? Isn't this the party that likes to name itself pro-life? Yet the the policies that it puts forth, many a times, is pro-death. Today I watched and discussed as Senator Cornyn simply in a nonchalant manner said, we're not doing anything else about guns. Pretty much it's over. There's not bipartisan support to do anything else. What he means is that Republicans intend to do nothing else. So saying it's bipartisan that's stopping it, it's not the issue. It's that Republicans decided that they don't mind the killing of Americans with AR-15s and other assault rifles, as long as those kids and those folks who love their guns have you to use as target practice. No problem. We have a big population. We have 330 million people. We don't care if just a few of them get knocked off every day. Actually, it's every day that it's occurring. Every day. We don't care. Guns, guns, guns. It's not a problem. I want you to listen to this. But you know, as I was watching this, I said to myself, I wonder if the news media is going to just listen to Cornyn and take it as a matter of fact and not put any kind of narrative onto it. And you know who surprised me? You know who impressed me? Mika of Morning Joe, because her response was perfectly on. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
No, we're done.
No more action.
No. It seemed to me to be yesterday the president talked about everything that they wanted, but they didn't get in the bill. But the sort of things he was calling for don't have support in the Senate or in the Congress on a bipartisan basis. In other words, they can't get done.
Senator Cornyn's comments there follow President Biden's renewed call for a ban on semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 after the July 4th mass shooting in Highland Park, Illinois. Senator Cornyn also said he had not received any contact from Democratic senators to begin a new round of talks on gun legislation. Mika.
Senator Cornyn, we're done. I mean, who are these Republicans? Who are you people? You don't want to ban on assault weapons. You wonder why the police are afraid to go into a school with an active shooter who has weapons of war. There's a reason they hesitated. It may not have been right, but my God, police are now outgunned. So you don't want to ban on assault weapons. You don't want more restrictions on these weapons of war. You want women who are raped, young girls who are raped, to be forced to have births. I mean, this is what the Republican Party is at this point. And forget the fact that you will not stand up about what happened on January 6th. This is impossible. This is a party that is taking on cases that don't stand up to where we are as a country. It's so hard to hear. And hear these mass shootings, Senator Cornyn. They're coming to a state or a city near you. You know it. It's just like Trump. You know how it ends, and yet you still continue.
Mika is absolutely right. It is interesting because early this morning, when I saw the videos on CNN from the Austin American-Statesman, I went ahead and I wrote a tweet, and I want you to check out what I wrote. I wrote on that tweet that said, and I placed the video on it as well that from that program. NRA said it takes a good guy with a gun to take out the bad guy with a gun. Tens of police, the good guys with guns, ran from one bad guy with an AR-15. Perfect reason to ban AR-15 and assault guns, assault rifles, weapons of war. Won't you say? I mean, who are these people, as Mika says? Who are the Republicans? Isn't this the party that likes to name itself pro-life? Yet the policies that it puts forth, many a times, is pro-death. Welcome to another edition of Politics Unwrapped. I'm Egberto Willies, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Daniel Cohen, president of Indivisible Houston, I wanted to talk about this feud that's been happening between Lina Hidalgo and District Attorney Kim Ogg. And the reason I want to bring this up is these are two Democrats. One is a progressive Democrat. One I have always had an issue with, even though I've spoken to her a couple of times, but it concerns me. Daniel, welcome to Politics Done Right once again.
Thank you, Alberto. I appreciate you. Let's do this.
Yeah, well, look, there was an article that came out, and it came out after I've been thinking about this for some time, and you're one of our most trusted advisors here in Houston as an activist with Indivisible Houston. What's your thoughts on the genesis of the feud between Kim Ogg and Lina Hidalgo?
So a little bit of context too, if I may, right? We can, because we need to go back actually 2018 for a second, and then I promise to talk about this. Lina Hidalgo was the only person who ended up running to be the Democratic candidate for county judge, but that's only because at the last minute, a guy named Mike Nichols, who now is a big Lina Hidalgo supporter, who was considering running, decided not to run, citing health reasons. And at the time, actually, I was working with the judge. And I haven't worked with very many political candidates over the last few years. In fact, it was Bill McLeod. But a lot of what's happening recently has brought me back into the fold of it, where I'm supporting her and backing her up as staff for this next few months, because I'm seeing the hijinks and the shenanigans and the nonsense that's going on, and seeing that there needs to be extra support because of people like Kim Ogg.
Well, let me see. I want to get this right. You're saying there's a whole lot of shenanigans and manipulations that you're seeing in this attempt to get this young, vibrant, progressive woman who came into power when nobody else. And in fact, I think, and tell me if I'm right here, but too often Emmett, who was the previous judge that she beat, too many darn Democrats were giving him a pass when he did many undemocratic things. Is that correct?
Oh, not only is that correct, but the way that the county used to run before Lina Hidalgo was outright corruption. If you look at the meetings back then, I mean, there was at one point where I as an advocate, I brought to the table a ProPublica story that had broken that demonstrated that they had a Harris County hurricane plan that they failed to implement. And I asked them about, I basically read them the news for 3 minutes. You can find it, wrote an editorial in the Chronicle later about it, and they didn't respond to it at all. But I'll tell you what, they funded the Astrodome to the tune of hundreds of millions, if not more than $1 billion later that meeting. The mainstream press only covered the Astrodome funding. And I remember they slammed the gavel when we were out of there in 45 minutes to an hour, which is the way the commissioner's court used to run. I mean, you get out of there in an hour, right? You didn't talk about anything. Nobody had any idea of what was going on. One of the reasons that moderate Democrats formerly would back Ed Emmett is because they didn't know any of this stuff was going on. And the reason they didn't know was because Harris County Commissioner's Court was so low profile and therefore lacked any and all transparency. These meetings that last all day long are meetings that show exactly what's going on in Harris County through the morning, through the noon, through afternoon. That's why the meetings are so long. This is easily the most transparent county government that we've ever had in the history of Harris County. Hands down, no questions about it whatsoever. And people don't like that because now you can't get away with a lot of the stuff.
No more smoke-filled rooms.
That's there's a heck of a lot less of them, that's for sure. And the people in them, the people who used to be able to get away with stuff are no longer able to get away with stuff, which is kind of interesting given kind of some of the discussions from mainstream media surrounding it. But when it comes to Ogg, specifically when it comes to Ogg,
before you go to Ogg, because I want to ask a question that I saw in that article.
Sure.
Is it true that right in the beginning of Lina Hidalgo's tenure, that Ogg wanted to have some sort of control over her and presented her with, I want you to hire this person?
Well, there was definite. So that was a lot. That's interesting because that claim I didn't know as much about actually, but it's pretty well vetted if you look at the article. And because it's pretty well vetted, if you look at the article, you can kind of trace the sources on that. What I'll say is that where the big split began is that Ogg pushed for a larger budget, and
right, I remember that.
And when you're looking at what she's asking for more prosecutors, she's asking for funding, and meanwhile, she's got huge turnover going on in her office, so she can't fill the positions that she has. So it became really a political feud over budgets more than anything else, and you can trace some of that back. So you take someone like, a drive-by media guy like Wayne Dolcefino, who Kim Ogg didn't have a good relationship with. Okay, then all of a sudden, right? Dolcefino starts changing his coverage a little bit. Ogg gets closer to Crime Stoppers, who, by the way, takes more than $1 million out of taxpayer dollars, your money and my money, so that they can turn around and run political hit jobs left and right in their commercials and out in the public sphere. And you take something like that, and all of a sudden, Dolcefino and Ogg are best buddies. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are very clearly going on that are highly questionable. But it all comes down to power plays, political hit jobs for budget purposes and for personal power in the county. She doesn't like some of the things she's doing because it gets in the way of her personal agenda. And so Kim Ogg doesn't like Lena Hidalgo, and it's that simple.
Now, as it turns out, Lena refuses to give her 100 and something more district attorneys. Prosecutors. And what's interesting, right, is it is a sound thing to do. You get a lot more prosecutors. You make less deals to and bring a whole lot more trials. You bring a whole lot more trials. You get a lot more convictions. You get a lot more convictions. You get more people in jail. You get more people in jail. You're no longer being fiscally responsible with the taxpayer dollars, because now you have to fund more jail space. You have to fund more food. You have to fund more education for all these things that could be done outside of the penal system. Am I correct?
Of course, it's a recipe for mass incarceration. And I'll tell you this, too, it doesn't address crime whatsoever, because what you're doing is you're taking people who theoretically have committed a crime, although in a lot of cases we know that the criminal justice system is extremely biased, especially here in Harris County, where we have one of the worst criminal justice histories in the United States. But regardless of that, if you take someone who's committed a crime and you've pulled them off the street and you've put them into prison, you're not preventing any crime from happening in the future. You're only focusing on punitive justice, or quote unquote justice, punitive retribution related to something that's already happened. So it's all a big smoke and mirrors joke. I mean, it's nonsense right now. It's obviously political hits. If she could slam her fist on the table and yell about crime and point her fingers at somebody who opposes her political agenda, then she gets to score points off of that. And it's based on a house of cards. And our hope is to see it toppling down.
Now, interestingly, Daniel, it seems to me like Kim Ogg is playing the right-wing ideological moves, or trying to play right-wing ideological moves, both in the crime with bail bonds, but even further, if we take a look at what she's starting to represent, it seems like what she is doing is opening the door for others, not necessarily to challenge her, but to challenge other Democrats, Lena Hidalgo being the prime one. But there are some ancillary others that get taken in, the judges, etc., because it gives the false impression that it is Democrats, that it is progressives who are soft on crime, when the reality is that the open gun field that we have in Houston right now is a direct result. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me the direct result of the laws passed by a Republican Congress in Austin, signed by a Republican governor, that threw a whole bunch of guns on the streets of Houston. You get more guns. The Republicans like to say you get more drugs, more people use drugs. You get more guns, more people use more guns.
Not only are you right, but the dynamics of it and the number of angles of it are very easy to trace, right? So you're looking at Ogg, like I said earlier, right, playing buddy-buddy with Dolcefino. Just after he starts starts going after judges, she suddenly is friends with him. They're enemies, and then he goes after judges, and now they're friends all of a sudden. And it's just like that. Then you look at what she's doing with Crime Stoppers, and you see the connections between the people she's connected to and the people who are over on the Alexandra Mealer campaign, the Harris County Republican GOP county judge candidate, and you start seeing the connections between that. Meanwhile, Mealer is backed by people like Ted Cruz. She's backed by some of the most vicious and hateful right-wing flaks at the local level. But when she's asked questions, which is rare because the media has not started asking her questions about things, but when somebody on Twitter asks her a question about her take on abortion, she doesn't say things one way or another. All of the problems that are happening right now, right? If you want to talk about crime going up, you look around the country, crime's gone up. Gee, I wonder what could have happened. We have people struggling out on the job market. We had COVID. We had a pandemic that's now entering, I don't know how many waves at this point. It's the most contagious variant that we've ever seen that's now entered it. And to your point, the Republican legislature in Austin has been saddling us with a rickety grid, so we've had uncertainty. They've been cutting education funding, they've been cutting healthcare funding, and they've been blocking healthcare funding at every single turn. So, yeah, it's no wonder that you're having trouble, but it's really easy for someone to use that for their own political purposes and their own political power, which is
they're allowed to do it. If they're allowed to do it. And now my question to you as an activist out there, what are rank and file Democratic and progressive activists doing to ensure that people like Kim Ogg, who are doing the anti-democratic thing, and not only that, but using the power of her office to intimidate those who she wants to go against? How is that mitigated?
Well, I think there's two things that's happening. One, people are changing how they're spending their time and putting more attention on the issue, whether that's in campaign positions or if that's in volunteer positions or whatever it is. Two, some of the people who are out, like, the Houston abolitionist collectives and things like that have been calling out Kim Ogg's pro-mass incarceration position, more and more often over the last 2-3 years. I mean, they've made sure to make noise about it. But the other thing is that the electoral people are starting to hit doors, that they're starting to come out and actually hit doors and start looking at this. And there's more and more conversations about it. People are tired of Kim Ogg inside of the Democratic Party, particularly inside of the rank and file Democratic Party. And she's going to hear about that. She'll hear about that in the next primary. But in the meantime, I think that there's a lot of discussion in the general activist atmosphere about what's going on. And conversations like the one you and I are having are becoming more and more common.
And last question, and this has to do with where these types of campaignings are occurring, because we know that the people that are always used when a politician needs to score a point, the ones that always get used are people of color and poor white folk, because they have no other avenue. So therefore, are we concentrating in these areas of Houston? Let's say Latino districts, let's say Black districts, let's say poor white districts, etc., to ensure that the wrath that Kim Ogg needs to bring onto the people to give her bona fides to Republicans, that they are not, that they are made aware of this and start fighting for what they have to fight for to ensure that it isn't successful.
I think that the conversations are definitely happening all over Harris County right now, but grassroots activists should, and all activists should hear what you just said as much as possible. That should be honestly the most common, one of the most common refrains that people hear, especially on the canvassing side and on the outreach side, because Harris County is 60% Black and brown population, and no population is a monolith. So we have to be having conversations all over Harris County. We also need to be acknowledging the fact that this is an area the size of Connecticut. It's one of the largest counties in the entire country, and it's almost a state unto itself. And it's a state that's repressed by an even larger state the size of France. So when you look at it, look at what's going on right now. When you look at things like the grid, Harris County doesn't have its own grid. That's the state of Texas making bad decisions that come down on the backs of people in our hometown. And we need to be having conversations about things like that. We also need to be having that conversation about Kim Ogg and the mass incarceration agenda that she pushes.
Final thoughts.
I want to stress this as much as I can is that, again, something that hasn't been talked about is the Harris County GOP is running an extremist who's cheroding as a moderate for Harris County judge, and Kim Ogg is basically de facto in league with that candidate right now. And people need to be paying attention to what's going on, because just like we've seen at the state level and the federal level, it is possible for us to turn back the clock here in Harris County instead of continuing to move forward and make progress. So all of the things that you've talked about, extremely important. And as always, thank you for being a member of the free and independent media, Egberto. I appreciate you.
Thank you so kindly. Daniel Cohen, president of Indivisible Houston and one of the major activists, not only in Houston, but around the country. Thank you so kindly for what you continuously bring to our body politic.
Thank you, Egberto.
Please get one of my several books out there. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, for a contribution of $120. It's worth it. How to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors for a contribution of $120. How to make America utopia, take away the economy from those who rigged it, for a pledge of $120. Get any 2 of those books for $200, any 3 of those books for $250. The contributions for my books go directly to support our station, KPFT 90.1 FM. Alternatively, folks, please get your basic KPFT only membership for $40, a Pacifica only membership for $25, or choose from one of our many other gifts for your contribution. Just go to kpft.org. Choose Politics Done Right for the program and select an option either for our books or something else to support the station. It is definitely worth it. You can listen and or watch Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My Twitter handle is @Egberto Willies, @EGBERTOWILLIES. But don't you forget, listen to us live on air at KPFT 90.1 FM on Thursdays at noon and at Fridays at 11 a.m. all Central Time. Please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds. Keep KPFT on your mind. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them you know about this station in town, 90.1 FM Houston, that needs your support. That is there to provide that nourishment that we need. KPFT 90.1 FM Houston. Well, folks, that's it for today. You know how I'm going to end this baby. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.